All right, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning back in with us today. I've got my buddy Mike Sullivan. Mike, how are you, man?
I'm doing great.
So we've been. This is something that Mike evidently brought to my attention before April's Berean conference, and I didn't say anything about it because maybe I just ignored him. But I finally got Leithart's commentary, and we've been thinking about it and talking about it, and we kind of wanted to do some stuff on Leithart's commentary today, and just kind of think about maybe some inconsistencies. Is that a fair word, Mike? Is inconsistent? Is that fair?
Yeah, glaring inconsistencies.
So, in regards to apekdechomai and some things that I did a video on not too long ago were about some text in First Thessalonians and Philippians 3 that Leithart gave to 8070. And I thought it was interesting to kind of see that these guys do change their mind. I sent Mike a article that Leithart had done off of Theophilus from 2018, and he was still taking First Thessalonians 4 in the future there. But now in his commentary here, he has backtracked that and taken this a different way. So interesting to kind of see a shift that goes on here. So, Mike, I'll kind of let you give some thoughts on it and see where we want to go with this.
Yeah, I think the context was I was speaking at Berean on 1 Corinthians 15. So what do? Well, you go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and you develop the context because 1 Corinthians 15 isn't an island unto itself. There's all kinds of eschatology leading up to 1 Corinthians 15. So I was in chapter 1 and I was like, gee, I wonder what some partial preterists say about chapter 1, especially with the gifts, right? The gifts confirming them to the end. Well, what's the end? What's the day? What's the day of the Lord here? What are they going to say? And it was interesting because I got into Revelation here with Peter Leithart, and he was taking apekdechomai here, eagerly wait, as in the context of 8070. Then I started looking at some of the other passages, and I see First Thessalonians 4, like right after him making a connection between First Corinthians 7 and apekdechomai with apekdechomai in Philippians 3, which is the resurrection. And then right after that, he starts talking about First Thessalonians 4 in the context of him developing New Testament immanence and saying
Right.
this language is referring to 8070. So I start calling people, texting people. I'm like, do you guys see what I'm seeing? Like, he just gave up Philippians 3 and First Thessalonians 4.
And
And I got no response from anybody. No one would even read the thing.
nobody could afford it. You got more money than all of us.
Yeah. Anyone that has this already, but I was blown away, and I was like, and the thing is, Zach, 20 years ago, I wouldn't even consider it. I'd be like, he just screwed up in his writing, right? He lumped this together with
Right.
everything he's saying is 8070. But if it wasn't for guys like Mike Bull taking First Thessalonians 4, Philip Kaiser taking the parousia in First Thessalonians 4, now
Kaiser
we
also
have
takes part of First Corinthians 15. You know, there's a section in there where he splits a verse, before the then comes the end deal. So he's got some interesting thoughts on First Corinthians 15 too. Biblical Bible blueprints. Philip Kaiser, First Corinthians 15 in his survey. You guys can go check that out. I'll try to link it below.
and what he says on First Thessalonians. Go to his page on First Thessalonians, and you'll see what we're talking about. But let's go ahead and read the text first, or no, read his quote of what he says. Even after Jesus dies and rises, the apostles, all of them, eagerly expect. Now that's apekdechomai, something to happen, something big, something soon. So let's stop here. He's equating soon with eagerly wait. There's no way of getting around that, okay? Philippians 3:20 uses the same verb of eagerly wait as in 1 Corinthians 1:7.
Let me make this point. If for anybody watching, the reason we think that Philippians 3 is such a big deal is because this is the body passage. And I just had a guy on the phone, damn me, 2 days ago or 3 days ago now, and say Philippians 3 is clearly a body. Well, you partial preterists need to get together because some of your partial preterist buddies think this is 8070.
Well, that, and I would just tell that guy he's a Gnostic, because Paul says it's a vile body. So if he's saying that that's your physical body, then I would say, well, are you a Gnostic? Are you trying to say that the physical body is inferior to? So anyway, yeah, that's crazy. So he goes on, he goes, they are eagerly waiting something, the revelation of the Lord Jesus. He concludes that the best explanation is, quote, the apostles mean what they say, and that these New Testament imminent time texts refer to AD 70. You can look at that at volume 1, pages 25 and 26. And I think that's pretty much where you were looking too, at those pages as well. And
Yeah,
I think he
I
gives the
quoted
farm away
26.
right here.
Yeah, I quoted 26 because I mean it's all in the imminence section for him. And it's funny, Mike, because he just kind of footnotes it kind of like in smaller text and then moves on. But like we see it. And
And
if you know what you're looking for, you see it.
another dead giveaway for this is that he doesn't really even address First Thessalonians 4 anywhere in 2 volumes.
I've only finished the introduction. Don't spoil it for me.
I'm just telling you, if he was giving away First Thessalonians 4 because his conscience is telling him to, but he doesn't want to be public about it, the best way to deal with that is just to not address it. And he doesn't anywhere else.
I'm willing to bet he doesn't walk through Philippians 3 anywhere in this deal either.
Now that I don't know, but I think you're right. I would guess that's true as well. So, I don't know. Maybe when he retires, maybe all of a sudden something will come out. But to me, those were some dead giveaways. But on this particular text, there's no vagueness. He's saying apekdechomai is eagerly expect, which means soon, which he says the apostles meant what they said, and that it happened in AD 70. And he says that it's the same verb form as Paul is eagerly expecting the resurrection, the vile body being conformed to his glorious body. So this is a huge, huge admission.
Don and I are doing a 2 Corinthians 3-5 thing. So at some point, we'll get to this idea of the body in Philippians 3, hopefully.
It could be a 10-part series.
No, it's going to be a 3 or 4 part series.
It might even turn into a show.
Somebody commented this morning. He said, Don Preston's really knowledgeable, but why is the guy hosting it seem like he's so angry trying to rush this thing? And I was just thinking, dude, if I don't keep pressing him, this is going to be a 75-part series.
Right. Bless his heart. I know. But it's always good stuff. Even when he does a rabbit trail, you learn
gold.
Something. Huh?
It was gold.
It was. Okay, so what does 1 Corinthians 1 actually say? That in every way you are enriched in him in all speech and all knowledge. Now, John Lightfoot says knowledge here is the gift of knowledge of 1 Corinthians 13. And he's absolutely right. Even as the testimony about Christ was confirmed. Now, this Greek word will show up elsewhere with the gifts among you, so that you come short in no gift. Well, what gift is he talking about? Well, in chapter 12 through 14, they're the miraculous gifts.
Yeah, there's a big deal about gifts in this book. I mean, it's largely they're abusing it. And we're not saying just regular knowledge. We're talking about Daniel 12 special revelatory knowledge, right, Mike?
Acts 15, right? James turns to the other apostles and says, hey, the Gentiles coming in, that's the fulfillment of Amos 9. The Gentiles coming in is David's tabernacle being rebuilt. That is the miraculous gift of knowledge. Okay. And it's in the same context as tongues, right? And prophecy. And those are revelatory gifts. So when he's talking about knowledge in 1 Corinthians 13, it is a very specific miraculous gift. You're right. So he says, okay, eagerly waiting, there's our apekdechomai, for the revelation of our Lord Jesus Christ, the second coming, who will also confirm you to the end. Well, the end of what? That you may be blameless. So what does apekdechomai mean, Zach?
It means to not only wait with patience and confidence, but to wait expectantly.
Very good. Very good. I don't know where you got that from. Yeah. So you're waiting on tiptoes.
Okay,
And I
that's what I
think,
was going to ask. Is this the word where everybody I hear them say they're on their tiptoes looking?
yeah. Now, if you listened to, and I'm sure it's in their book now, Gary DeMar and Kim Burgess, when they were going through Romans 8, Gary specifically jumped on this word, and he used an illustration of like a boy, trying to watch a big league professional baseball, and he's on the fence, and he's on his tiptoes looking over in an expectancy to look and to watch. And they were referring Romans 8 to AD 70, by the way. So apekdechomai here is a time text, and that's what we want to just kind of ram home here. And it's connected to the gifts. And when the gifts cease at the end of the old covenant age is also when the resurrection takes place. So we want to connect 1 Corinthians 1 with apekdechomai of the resurrection of Philippians 3, which Leithart gives away. And then after that, we're going to stay in 1 Corinthians 15 and at least make it to chapter 13 and chapter 15, if that's all right with you.
All right.
And just kind of, it won't take 20 episodes. I think we can knock this out. All right. So Philippians 3, 20, 21. But we don't want to forget chapter 4, 5, because that is what consummates this resurrection. For our citizenship is in heaven, New Jerusalem, in the process of coming down and would come down. You're in 2 Corinthians 3 with Don, chapter 5. This is that temple, that heavenly house, the New Jerusalem.
The house made without hands.
And further clothed. Wait with eager expectation a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly body, or vile body, I prefer, to be like his glorious body, by the power that enables him even to subject all things to himself. And then you're asking yourself, well, when's this going to take place? Well, first of all, there's a time text. They were eagerly expecting it, so it was going to take place soon. But then the next chapter confirms that. It would be at the Lord's at hand coming that would bring about this resurrection. Now,
I want to hear Leithart say what body was transformed then, if he's given this passage to 80-70.
Right. I don't think that we're going to find, I have a feeling it's going to be like 1 Thessalonians 4. I don't think we're going to find it.
Well, I'm not paying $96 for the next one if he's not touching either one of those.
Right on. And then, of course, apekdechomai is used in Romans 8. And Kim Burgess and Gary DeMar take this as 80-70. So I would think that Philippians 3 would fall right in there as well. The glory that is about to be, mellow, revealed in us, not to us. For the creation waits with eager longing, there it is, apekdechomai, for the revealing of the sons of God, and not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly, apekdechomai, for the adoption as sons, the redemption of our body, or the body. So pretty clear here that apekdechomai is in the same context of other 80-70 imminent time text, about to be, right, mellow.
Does he touch Romans 8 any in this commentary or no?
I looked, I didn't see it. I'll look again. I want to see if he did. He doesn't deal with mellow. He avoids that like the plague.
A lot of times in creation stuff, because I read a lot of Leithart, and a lot of times in creation stuff, he takes it as physical. So I would be super interested in Romans 8 on the text.
But we're just showing the inconsistency. If apekdechomai in 1 Thessalonians 1 is fulfilled in 80-70, then you have the end there, which would have to be the end of the old covenant age. At the day of the Lord would be his parousia, right, in 80-70 as well, when the gifts would cease. And we have to be consistent with apekdechomai, and we're not seeing that they are. So kind of basic logic here. If A equals B and B equals A, everyone agrees that A, Philippians 3, Romans 8, that's the resurrection, is equal to B, 1 Corinthians 15. It's the same resurrection. Premise 1, if the resurrection of A, Philippians 3 and Romans 8, was imminently expected and fulfilled in 80-70, Kaiser has to say that at this point on Philippians 3, and other partial preterists like John Lightfoot saw that the creation in Romans 8 is the creation of men and not physical creation. And Gary DeMar has said, whatever this glory is, it was about to be in AD 70. And Gary is also on record as talking about apekdechomai is referring to AD 70. So, okay, so then premise 2. And if A, Philippians 3 and Romans 8 is equal to and the same resurrection event as B, 1 Corinthians 15, that likewise was expected to take place in the first century. We shall not all die, just like Jesus says, there are some standing here who shall not die. Conclusion, then the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15 was also imminently expected and fulfilled in AD 70. If not, why not?
How do you take, I'd like to see what Kaiser does in Philippians 3. I don't think I've read his survey there, but how can you, if you're Leithart, how can you take the body of Philippians 3 to be a different body or whatever you're doing with 1 Corinthians chapter 15?
Well,
especially after you take apekdechomai in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 to be eagerly, and you're taking apekdechomai about the body in Philippians 3 to be eagerly, and then we switch for some reason the body in 1 Corinthians 15 is not eagerly. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk about first the gifts, and then we're going to get into the already not yet, because Philippians 3 has an already and not yet process. 1 Corinthians 1 has an already not yet process too, because it says that they were being saved. All right. But first of all, let's address the gifts here with apekdechomai in 1 Corinthians 1. What does Mark 16 and Matthew 28 say? Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. And these signs will accompany those who believe, such as the Corinthians. And they went out and preached everywhere while the Lord worked with, pay attention to that word with, the Lord worked with them through miracles. Behold, and in Matthew 28:20, I am with you always to the end of the age. He's not talking about Jesus is going to be with them drying their tears as the church collectively preaches the gospel and the nations of the world get Christianized. All right. He's talking about being with them through the paraclete. Just as Mark 16 ends with the Great Commission and the charismata, Matthew is ending his gospel with the charismata. Now, I do know that there are some textual issues with the end of Mark, but I'm going to, at this point, just assume that it's a part of the New Testament, okay? And if it is, there's perfect parallel here between how Mark ends the gospel and with Matthew. And I don't know, Zach, do you think that there's a inconsistency within partial preterism on the end of the age when it comes to the gospel of Matthew?
I think so, because in Matthew 24, you see certain things that are going to happen in Matthew 24:14 that most of them will give to AD 70. And then you turn right around a couple of chapters later in Matthew 28, and they start throwing it off into the future when you see some of the same wording that's present. I did a video on that, but I'm with you on seeing the confirmation here that these are, the idea of them being with are supernatural gifts. And think about what a good apologetic that is for cessationism. But you can't be a consistent cessationist and be a futurist. It's not possible. It is not possible.
So when I debated Dr. Michael Brown on 1 Corinthians 13, I was very consistent. Now, when you hear Doug Wilson debate Michael Brown, specifically on the question I asked you about the end of the age, right?
Yeah.
So Doug says, I believe that the gifts ended at the end of the old covenant age in AD 70.
Right.
Now, Michael Brown, having debated Don, debated me,
he knew better.
He knew exactly how to respond at this point. He knew how to use our arguments against the partial preterists. And he said, you can't do that, Doug, because in Matthew 13, the end of the age is the resurrection of Daniel 12.
That's right.
Doug shut Doug down. Doug didn't want to go there. He's avoided Daniel 12 like the plague with us, with everybody. So he didn't want to go there. But that's what I'm talking about, the inconsistency. Whereas Joel McDermott, Gary DeMar, Peter Leithart would take the end of the age in Matthew 13, the parable of the wheat and the tares, as the old covenant age in AD 70. They would take the end of the age in Matthew 24:3 as the old covenant age. But all of a sudden, when we get here to Matthew 28:20, The end of the age is the end of world history.
Is it an assumption on their part of which nations are being discipled? Is that a fair question? Is that the hang up?
Yes, because they've held on to their post-millennialism for so long. It's kind of like their calling card or their kind of identity, that they really believe that that is victory, right?
Right.
They don't let Paul define what victory is in 1 Corinthians 15 over the death, the sin, and the law. That's how Paul defines what victory is for the church. No, they define victory as the nations of the entire globe or planet being Christianized.
Well, every Greek word that Jesus uses at the end of these gospels, Paul uses it. The catesis had heard it in Colossians. I mean, all of these words,
Everyone.
Paul says that they've heard it.
All nations, all nations.
From oikomene to gaze to catesis to all of it. So,
yep, absolutely.
I don't know why they're trying to hold on to that, and I guess it is simply because of the resurrection. But I don't hear Doug Wilson address Matthew 13. I don't hear Jeff Durbin address Matthew chapter 13.
No.
What are we going to do with the end of the age in those passages where the resurrection is present? Oh, by the way, Mike, it's the same harvest in Revelation 14 that they've already given to 80, 70. So then why is the resurrection in Matthew 13? Then if I've got a resurrection in Matthew 13 already, what about Philippians 3? What body is that? And if apekdechomai is in Philippians 3 and in 1 Corinthians 15, why is it not the same body in 1 Corinthians 15?
But Zach, Gentry has already spoken that partial preterism does not lead to full preterism, right? I mean, and yet clearly it does. Even Sam Frost, his good buddy, continues to say that partial preterism leads to full preterism.
Well, he got that
because of these glaring inconsistencies that we're pointing out.
Yep. Sometimes I wonder, Mike, if it's just that are we giving them too much credit, some of them, or do they see it by giving them too much credit? I mean, are we just assuming that they know it and they really don't know it, or do they actually know it and they won't touch it?
I think they know it and they don't want to touch it. Again, there's a lot of 401ks, a lot of careers that are inseparably connected to the creeds.
Well, I mean, at some point we need some men with some guts to stand in the pulpit, because I just stood in front of a church and said, hey, this is what I believe. You want me to resign? I'll resign. And if not, then so be it. I mean, we're going to have some people with some guts that ain't worried about paycheck at some point here if we're going to advance what the Bible's teaching. I
agree with you 100%. All right, so let's stay in 1 Corinthians. We've looked at Philippians 3. There's an already and not yet. Remember, Paul he had attained to the glory and righteousness of Christ to some degree, but not completely. And he says that he's longing for Christ's righteousness, right? And then Romans 4:24, the Greek word melo is used there, and it talks about the church was about to be accredited Christ's righteousness at Christ's soon coming. All right. So now let's go into 1 Corinthians and just stay in 1 Corinthians. This is kind of what I did at the conference.
Okay.
So number 1, you have gifts such as tongues, prophecy, and knowledge mentioned in 1 Corinthians 1 and in 1 Corinthians 13. 2, you have the gifts confirming the church, the early church, till the day of the Lord or till the end of the old covenant age. What do we have in 1 Corinthians 13? The gifts would be practiced until that which is perfect would come. Well, Zach, what do most people believe that which is perfect is?
A future rebuilt earth and the second coming that happens at the event.
Exactly, the second coming. And charismatics are right on that.
So when Mike, just explain for people, when you say confirm to the end of the age, you mean that those miraculous gifts would be present with the followers of Christ in the church to validate that they were his true people, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then they would cease per 1 Corinthians 13 when the perfect comes at the end of the old covenant age, when the law is fulfilled and the new covenant kingdom comes.
Okay. Because they were revelatory gifts. They weren't just miraculous sign gifts, but they were revelatory gifts. And Jesus places the fulfillment of all prophecy to be in his generation, Luke 21. So these gifts are aiding the church in bringing revelation, just like we talked about Acts 15, right?
Yeah.
James getting that revelation.
The futures are consistent. If there's prophecy still left to be filled, then those gifts would be necessary for the purpose of revelation.
Yes. But
Okay.
notice in Daniel 9:24 how he connects the sealing up of vision and prophecy or prophet. When all Old Testament prophecy would be fulfilled, the office of prophet would stop,
Yeah.
with the same time when everlasting righteousness would be brought in.
Right.
So again, we have this, it's inseparable. The charismatics are absolutely correct. The gifts will not cease until the second coming or until the new creation arrives, the
That's
world
right.
of righteousness. They are dead on there. And and guys like Wilson and guys like Gentry can't consistently deal with the charismata. Number 3, there was a spiritual process taking place. They were being saved. Now, if you look at 1 Corinthians verses 18 and 20, it talks about the Corinthians, they were in the process of being saved while the gifts were confirming them
Right.
to the end of the Old Covenant age. When Christ's parousia and the end of the Old Covenant age arrives, then they are saved. But during that time, they were being saved. What's 1 Corinthians 13 say? There was a spiritual process taking place. A boy was growing into a man, or they were in the process of looking into a mirror dimly. Number 4, the gifts end at the coming of the Lord makes the church blameless. 1 Corinthians 13, the gifts cease at that which is perfect when they see God's face more clearly. So you see this process taking place, the already and not yet. But Zach, the New Testament tells us when the not yet ends this process, right?
All imminent.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what about 1 Corinthians 1? And that, remember, Peter Leithart has surrendered to AD 70. No question about it. Apekdechomai. So what we're doing is we're comparing it with what Paul says elsewhere in Corinthians. Again, apekdechomai, eagerly wait, but he also used this in resurrection context, which we covered, Romans 8 and Philippians 3. But look at 1 Corinthians 15. There's imminence. We shall not all die. Paul expected the parousia and the resurrection to take place in that first century time period. Number 2, it's the day of the Lord at his coming, parousia, which Philip Kaiser takes as AD 70. 3, already and not yet. They were being saved, and the wicked were in the process of perishing. Number 3, in 1 Corinthians 15, there's an already and not yet. They were being saved, just as in 1 Corinthians 1. And it also says death was being destroyed. New Testament picks up the present passive indicative. They were being sown a body in the ground, and they were being raised into a spiritual body. And then lastly, number 4, at the end, that is the end of this age or the Old Covenant age. And then in 1 Corinthians 15, it talks about the end. Now, Zach, if you're the Corinthians and you're reading 1 Corinthians, would you be like, oh, in chapter 1, he must be dealing with the Old Covenant age. But here in 1 Corinthians 15, when he talks about the end, it must be the end of world history.
That's probably not what I would have thought.
No, I don't think.
Whatever. Just think about it also in terms of the actives that are here in the tenses of these verbs. I mean, it's in the process of happening. I mean, it's not. Anyway,
This destroys the whole, in my estimation, the immortal body at death, which, like I've said before, we've always got a spiritual body at death. All right. But this is talking about a process of the body being sown and coming out and rising, just like Romans chapter 6, where they're being buried and they were dying and they were rising with Christ. Same concept is taking place in 1 Corinthians 15. Okay. And then number 5, the Corinthians would be guiltless at the imminent coming of the Lord. And then in 1 Corinthians 15, the Corinthians would be victorious over the sin, the death, and the law at the imminent coming of the Lord, and would receive immortality. So if you're going to be guiltless and blameless at the coming of the Lord in 1 Corinthians 1, and that's AD 70, why wouldn't the coming of the Lord in 1 Corinthians 15, which produces the same things, be the same event?
I'm still waiting on somebody to tell me why the death's defeated at the law. And if that law is
exactly
definite article, the law, Old Covenant law, then what I can't get anybody to explain that to me.
Yeah.
I asked the dude on the phone the other day that was condemning me, and he just sat there for 10 seconds. So,
okay, and then one last one. 1 Corinthians 13 and 1 Corinthians 15. Again, we have this already not yet. A boy was growing into a man, and they were looking into a mirror. They were being saved. Death was being abolished. They were being sown. They were being raised. Number 2, they would see God's face, when that which is perfect comes, that's the parousia, that's the new creation. They would inherit immortality and eternal life at Christ's parousia. You can clearly see the connections between 1 Corinthians 1, 1 Corinthians 13, and 1 Corinthians 15. And now I've got 3 slides, and only 3 slides on 2 Corinthians 3, if you want to go through
let's
them.
see it. Let's go through it.
You want to hit them? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to, because and for people watching, there's no disconnect in what's being said in 1 Corinthians, specifically in 15 and the resurrection stuff. Paul's explanation of it you find in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. And if Mike's fixing to compare 2 Corinthians 3, which many people consider is Paul's explanation of 1 Corinthians 15, and if there are parallels in 2 Corinthians 3 and 1 Corinthians 1, if 2 Corinthians 3 and 1 Corinthians 1 are the same, then why are 2 Corinthians 3 and 1 Corinthians 15 not the same, and 1 Corinthians 1 and 1 Corinthians 15 not all the same thing? We're just asking for consistency instead of theological Jenga and partial preterism.
Exactly. And it's the same letter, or it's letters to the same church, right? So what I've got a whole shelf over here on the charismata, like Pro and all that. And there's only one book, and it has one sentence in it that makes the connection between 1 Corinthians 13 and 2 Corinthians 3 and 4, because Paul uses that mirror imagery again and looking into him, and yet no one goes there. You know why? Because it's covenantal context.
Yeah.
And it would totally prove that the gifts ceased at the end of the old covenant.
Right.
Anyway, so in 2 Corinthians 3, we have a spiritual already not yet processed. The old covenant glory was passing away, while the new covenant glory was increasing. What do we have in 1 Corinthians? There was a spiritual process taking place. They were being saved. The next one, they were looking at the form of God as in a mirror and being transformed into the image of Christ. Now remember, Philippians 3, he had attained to this to some degree, right? And the Corinthians were being transformed. This was not a biological, and that's the problem, Zach, is futurists think they don't understand that this is positional language of who we are in the covenant and in our relationship with God. And they think this is all some kind of biological change that takes place at the end of world history.
Yeah.
So they're butchering soteriology, really.
I hear some Reformed people think that it's like some practical sanctification. So that's
even worse.
That's worse.
Yeah, because that can turn into work salvation really quick if you have a progressive sanctification. The third, their old covenant glory would pass away in AD 70, versus the new covenant glory would remain and thus mature in AD 70 and throughout the new covenant age. Then what do we have on the other side? We have gifts such as tongues, prophecy, and knowledge. We're in the process of confirming the church until the day of the Lord, or until the end of the old covenant age, when the church would become blameless. Again, that's wedding terminology. And Zach, do guys like Gentry surrender that the eschatological wedding was in AD 70?
I'm pretty sure he does.
So we're blameless.
Congratulations. You have
And if we're in the new creation, Zach, doesn't it say in Revelation 22, I think it's 4, that we see God face to face?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess that's when the resurrection took place, and that's when the gifts ceased.
Well, in 1 Corinthians 13, when the perfect comes, that's completion of the canon per Philip.
Yeah, that does not fly at all. It's the fulfillment of the canon. It's not.
Somebody did a lesson on that at Berean last year about the salvation from AD 30 to 70 and the mystery of God being completed. I wonder who it was.
Oh, gee. Plug. All right. And then we just have one more or two more to go. 2 Corinthians 3 again, and chapter 4. The old covenant glory was passing away while the new covenant was increasing. And then in 1 Corinthians 3, we have a boy growing from boyhood to manhood. B, they were looking in a mirror. This is kind of repetitious, but I think you guys get it. But the last point here, the old covenant glory would pass versus the new covenant glory would remain. And then in 1 Corinthians 3, you have three things that are going to pass away: tongues, knowledge, and prophecy. And then you have three things in the new covenant that would remain.
That's Hebrews 12. What's being shaken be removed, and the things that remain remain.
Exactly. And then you have the correlation between 2 Corinthians 3 and 4. I should add probably chapter 5 with 1 Corinthians 15. And you got the old covenant glory. The law that kills was passing away, new increasing. There was a spiritual process taking place. They were being saved. Death was being destroyed. You have the mirror. They were being transformed into the image of Christ. And then you have, again, them being sown and being raised. That's a covenantal transformation, both in 2 Corinthians 3, 4, and 5, and 6. We are the temple.
And that's the book of Hosea, to talking about how God sows and God plants. That's the naming of those kids. And oh, by the way, in 1 Corinthians 15, guess which book keeps getting quoted over and over, Mike?
That's the seed. I think Don Preston was the first to kind of offer the idea that there's an inclusio between Hosea 6 and Hosea 13. That is also present in 1 Corinthians 15. And so you have the seed, which is the Adamic Mosaic body being sown. But when it comes out, it's a different body. It's a spiritual body. It's a new covenant, glorified body. So absolutely.
And that's your body. And for anybody listening, that's the body of Philippians chapter 3, me and Mike.
Exactly. The last thing there, the old covenant glory would pass in AD 70, new covenant glory would remain. And then lastly, over in 1 Corinthians 15, the seed body of the church was being raised in power. It was being sown a natural body. It is being raised a spiritual body that remains, that's eternal. And that is incredible. So I think we've seen all the connections, Zach, between 1 Corinthians 1 and the day of the Lord there, and the gifts confirming the church until the end of the old covenant age, and how the partial preterist community and the futurist community have no answer to the cessation issue, and all the charismatic chaos, as one of my former pastors, John MacArthur, labels it. And John has no exegetical refutation. When I was a student at his college, I followed him around because I just graduated Calvary Chapel. I was a very educated charismatic. And I said, John, you know, what's going on here? I've got 4 arguments as a charismatic, and I don't want to be a charismatic at this point. But exegetically, if we're still in the last days, the Great Commission hasn't been fulfilled, and the second coming, that which is perfect, hasn't arrived, and we're still in the already and not yet of the kingdom, then I have to believe that the gifts are here. And he goes, well, just read my books. I said, John, I've read every one of your books on this subject. And you say that which is perfect is the new creation. And that gives I mean, if that's the case, that's future, then the gifts should be here.
Right.
And he just doesn't.
Justin Peters did it to me. Do you know who that is? The guy in the
guy in the wheelchair.
Guy in the wheelchair. Yeah. I asked him about, because he's primo, and I said, man, according to Acts 2, if we're still in the last days, then these gifts should be present. And no, well, they ended in the first century. I'm like, they can't end. They can't end until there's no bait. You can't get there scripturally. They're right. You know, they got it right, but they can't consistently get there. So
their overall position is right, but their exegesis is wrong. And the exegesis of the charismatic is correct to connect the gift ceasing at the second coming and the arrival of the new creation. And so they just kind of shoot at each other, and they're like two ships passing in the night, you know, and they'll never resolve it until full preterism.
Think about how many things are true, Mike, because of preterism in that regard, that they'll never get solved. I'm convinced, and I don't have it worked out either, and I don't know that anybody does yet, but some of this Calvinism, Arminianism stuff is the same way, because they don't see it through the proper lens of the context. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Mike, thanks for doing this. I'm proud we did it. I'm sure Leithart will watch it tonight, sitting on his sofa. So
he better. Hey, Don Preston, just to take notes. We did this in 40 minutes. I love you, bro.
Don, don't let him trash talk you. We're doing fine. Don, I'll text you. We'll get number 2 going. All right. This will be on my channel. Mike's going to upload it to his channel. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Like and subscribe to both of us. You can follow us on Patreon as well. We'll put those links down below. God bless you. We'll see you soon.
Take care, man.